of our quick introductions, and then the quick business we have, and hopefully the rest of the members can join in. So you started recording. Welcome, everyone. I'm Mark Naud, the chair of the Vermont Citizens Advisory Committee on the Lake Champlain's future. It is June 13th, the last of our sort of season of meetings at the end of the biennium. Tonight, we will have some follow-up on Round Gobi. We have a guest, Joe Ayotte. Joe, am I saying your name right?
Yeah, I think so.
Ayotte.
We say Ayotte, but I'm not sure really how you pronounce it myself. So,
okay. Who will be giving us an update on a USGS study of glyphosate on the Lake Champlain, a discussion related to sort of end of season legislative wrap up, and then we'll wrap up. And it's such a beautiful day. Again, it seems we keep having these meetings on gorgeous afternoons. So if we can, we'll wrap up early and get everybody outside, except the mosquitoes. I don't know where you guys are. Mosquitoes are unbelievable here in the Champlain Islands. I can't remember them being this bad. So any members of the public want to introduce themselves before we get going?
Sure. Corinne Littleack here. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Cree. Any comments or any items you want to bring to our attention?
No, I'm just looking forward to particularly, well, the updates on Round Gobi. I enjoyed the lake conference, that 2-day conference, thought it was wonderful. And would like to, of course, looking forward to Joe Ayotte's presentation.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else?
Tom Berry here, Senator Leahy's office. I'll trade the spongy moths down in the bay here in Colchester for them mosquitoes any day. I think we're the epicenter of the infestation in Vermont right now.
Yeah, I heard people shoveling half-inch off their driveways. That it's like snow season again. Okay, if there's no one else, we can move on. There's a draft meeting summary was shared. Another excellent job. Thanks, Katie. Is there a motion to accept them, and then we can have a discussion on any edits or other comments?
I'll make a motion to accept.
I'll second that, Bob Fisher.
Thanks, Bob. Any comments or edits on them? Okay, I think then we'll just go any abstentions. If there's no comments, we'll move for approval. Any abstentions? Then I will take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
And thanks again, Katie. I think that the meeting notes were really great. It really shares the gist of what went on a fairly lengthy meeting and a sort of broad conversation. So thanks again.
I'd like to second that. I think they're just excellent job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Is Meg, she join us yet?
I have not gotten a text back from her. I'm not sure if something came up. So we might want to switch the agenda order and get started with Joe's presentation instead.
Okay, we can do that. So next is Joe Ayotte, the Supervisory Hydrologist in New England Water Science Center with USGS. Joe, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then you and Katie can manage controls from here for any presentation you might have or any screen sharing. So thanks again for making the time to give us a preview of the study. I know it's not fully published yet, but we're looking forward to it.
okay, thank you, Mark. So My name is Joe Ayotte. As mentioned, I have been at the USGS in New Hampshire and part of the New England Water Science Center for a long time, 35 years, and mainly working in water quality related to drinking water, wells, and naturally occurring or geogenic or trace elements, or however you want to think of them, things like arsenic, uranium, and contaminants like that. But also from time to time, we've done work on anthropogenic compounds such as this. These compounds we'll talk about today. For those of you who don't know the USGS very well, we're a little difficult to characterize. We have a broad array of areas that we address through our mission to provide earth science to the nation. But in particular, one of the things about our agency that is particularly appealing to those of us who work here is that we are non-regulatory. We're very adamantly non-advocacy. We say what we find, we talk about what we think it means, but we don't take sides. And then kind of hand in hand with that is, and combined with the strict and rigorous protocols we use that are published, our work is generally considered pretty technically defensible. So I just wanted to preface anything with that so you knew a little bit about where we come from and how we approach problems, whether it's stream flow or water quality or whatever it is. So I'll launch into it. I don't have slides. I do want to show you a website at one point, and I do want to show you a data table at one point. So that's what I'll be focusing on, but mainly I'll start by just discussion, talking through this, and this is a small and informal group. I would welcome anyone to interrupt me at any time to ask questions if I don't explain something well enough, or if you want more information. I see I'm on for 45 minutes. I promise I'm going to use half of that or less, so no worries if you want to interrupt me. And by the way, one correction, the data they are published currently as of Friday night. So they, I'll show you that on the website, how you can access them and what they look like. But so we do things in a couple of ways now. All federal agencies are required when they do any kind of a study to make public the data that went into those studies, whatever it is. And so we do that in a couple of ways. One of these is through a data release, and that's what I'll be talking about a little bit later on. So as you may know, or you obviously know from the title, we conducted a study of pesticides in streams draining into Lake Champlain in the summer of 2021. This study was partly the result of discussions with a number of individuals, citizens groups, and people at the state, and ultimately it was funded in large part by the Lintelak Foundation. I want to acknowledge that. And the study was designed really to be a snapshot, or what we would call a synoptic study of compounds related to glyphosate and also neonicotinoids in small streams, just to see what we would see. And part of the impetus was we were going to approach this in a way we frequently do, which is measuring concentrations with a very low laboratory reporting level, meaning you know, whereas some studies might measure a compound and say it's below detection or below reporting levels, having a lower level analytical capability allows you to see a little bit more. You get frequently more reportable concentrations, and then from our point of view, you can think about those concentrations from a scientific point of view, from a policy point of view, from a any kind of point of view you want. but it gives you something to work with. So that was our goal. Water samples were collected from 5 sites. We anticipated 6, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. We collected samples from the Rock River near Highgate Center, Stevens Brook near St. Albans, Inglesby and Potash Brooks in Burlington. And we also sampled the Burlington wastewater treatment plant outfall. We anticipated sampling Jewett Brook near St. Albans and had planned on it, but I guess it's not too much of a shocker. But that site was had 0 flow from May through October that year. And so we couldn't really collect a sample according to protocols. Based on land cover, land use databases, the watersheds of Inglesby and Potash are predominantly urban, as you might guess, and those of Rock and Jewett Brooks are and Stevens are sorry, Rock and Jewett are agricultural. Stevens is mixed urban ag. We had designed or anticipated or hoped to sample a range of flows in those streams over the course of the spring, summer, and fall. The goal was to collect 3 to 4 samples per site. And one of those samples at least would target a high flow event, partly because compounds like glyphosate tend to be more mobile under high flow conditions. But as I just alluded to, we did not see high flows at all summer, except for we caught one storm event in Burlington, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So it was a very droughty year. We were basically sampling low stream flow conditions, and those conditions are really representative of straight groundwater discharge to streams. So streams during periods of no precipitation are maintained by discharge of groundwater. So no storm flow, no runoff. All of the data, including the quality control results, are in our data release. And I guess I'll show you that now. Can I just grab a screen share at this point, Katie?
Yeah, you should be able to just hit the up arrow, which is
Okay.
at the top of the screen if you're in the app. I'm not sure where it is in the browser. Oh, you got it. Good.
There you go. Okay. So this is, if you go to the URL that is at the top of the screen, I don't know if you can see it. Can you see this page okay, everyone?
If possible, if you can zoom in just a little, that would be great.
Oh, you're texting me. I wish
Okay.
I knew.
I mean, we can see it. I can see it. It's just a little bit small, but that's fine.
Okay. Sorry about that. I could probably find the button. I'm not used to this new browser we are mandated to use. So this is referred to as a landing page. It's where you end up if you go to the URL that I can give all of you. You can either use this URL up here to the Science Base catalog, or you can use the digital object identifier, which is down here, and both take you to the same place. Along with these data releases come a summary and a citation information section. And this really just tells you a little bit about what these data represent. There's contact information. Serena Matt from our Vermont office did the data compilation. She also did all of the sampling along with Ann Chalmers, who's recently retired from our office. And so below the contact information is the file array. And the first one you always come to is the XML, which is the metadata. And I'll just show you what that looks like. If you click on it, it brings up a hopelessly difficult pile of text, but it means a lot to people who care about data, and it specifies everything there is to know about the data, where it's located, what it includes, the projection, the coordinates, contact information, all the fields that are defined in the data set. So I won't dwell on that because it's hard to read and hopeless. The next two files, the second one is a data dictionary, and this is really, it's a downloadable file, and it's really just definitions of all of the columns in the data table. And that's helpful to have if you want more information. The last table, results, is the data file. Again, the way we store it is in a quote unquote machine readable format, not in a proprietary software. So we tend not to store these in Excel, for example. But if you were to have Excel open and read this file in, it would come in and look like something you're very familiar with in Excel and become easy to work with. In fact, I can maybe see if I can find the file. It's a good a time as any to show you. So again, I can make this bigger. This is what happens if you read that downloadable file into Excel. You would get this file. Sorry, let me find a good. You'd get this file which shows the site, and they're repeated a few times because we sampled them multiple times over the spring, summer, fall, mostly summer, fall. I've color coded them for now, just for this discussion, as red being the more urban sites and green being the more agricultural sites. And they're all surface water samples except for the wastewater treatment plant, which is effluent. And then you can see going across the top, there's a host of water quality constituents, physicochemical parameters like dissolved oxygen, pH, conductance, temperature, turbidity, we did do, and then nutrients. And I'll just go across a little bit. And then after the nutrients ending in nitrite and orthophosphate, we get into E. coli, total coliform, and then ultimately into various pesticides. And I guess I can jump right into this and get the spoiler alert over with. This column right here is glyphosate. And actually, before I talk about it, let me say one other thing. For every compound where a measurement is made in a laboratory, there are two columns. So for example, let's look at glyphosate. These are concentrations. All of them are 0.02, except for one, which is 0.08. And the preceding column is a remark column. And we do this because we want you to know what the laboratory reporting level was, or some people would call detection limit, but it's really what the laboratory reports to us. And that will show up if the remark field is a less than. So what this is saying is, for glyphosate at the Burlington wastewater treatment plant outfall, on that day, glyphosate was less than 0.02 micrograms per liter. So the units for every sample, or every compound rather, is in the title. It's tagged to the compound. So I just clicked on this glyphosate, and you can see up here that it's in micrograms per liter. I hope you can see that. That's probably pretty small. But each one has that. For example, if I looked at AMPA, also micrograms per liter. But if I look at some of these other pesticides, it's NGL, that's nanograms per liter. That's 3 orders of magnitude lower in reporting limit. So cut to the chase, for a glyphosate study, we basically saw almost no glyphosate the entire summer, which is not particularly surprising because it didn't rain really to speak of, or we didn't really get any runoff in the streams. So even at 0.02 micrograms per liter, 20 nanograms per liter, we did not see glyphosate except for one sample in Anglesby Brook, which was indeed after a bit of a rain event that we were able to get out and sample right after. Burlington did get a little more rain than the other areas over the summer. So that's the glyphosate story, but we also measured AMPA, which is one of the primary degradates of glyphosate. So glyphosate has a relatively short half-life, about a week or so. It also sticks pretty strongly to sediment, partly why we see it more commonly when there's runoff and sediment or turbidity. But AMPA, when glyphosate degrades to AMPA, AMPA has a much longer half-life, and it is not nearly as fond of sticking to sediment, so it dissolves in water a lot more readily. And kind of not surprisingly, based on the hydrologic regime, again, very little precipitation, mostly groundwater flow, we saw concentrations of AMPA. And this NA means that there's no less than number. So most of the samples had measurable concentrations of AMPA. A few of them did not, depending on the time of year. So in short, not a lot of evidence of glyphosate, even at low level, but quite a lot of evidence of the breakdown product of glyphosate. Again, these are all pretty low level. And I hesitate to interpret that in any way because we haven't looked at it in a way that we can interpret it yet, but I just wanted to show you what the data look like. Some of the other compounds of note, we were able to get data on atrazine, for example, and atrazine breakdown products. We did see atrazine almost all of the time in urban and agricultural sites, and similar concentrations in both, really. Moving along, carbendazim we saw fairly frequently. I'm not sure I can pronounce this very well. Maybe some of you can. This is a neonicotinoid replacement compound, and we did see this showing up fairly frequently, although more frequently in or higher concentrations really in some of the urban sites compared to the ag sites. And that's a piece of interpretation that we anticipate getting into when we do get down and start interpreting the information. Looking at groups of compounds rather, and groups of pesticides, and seeing, which ones appear in urban streams, which one of the urban streams, which ones are ag, and we'll certainly report on what we find in terms of co-occurrence or prevalence or comparing the urban and ag. But that's a little ahead of us at the moment. And so you can scroll, reading this table in, if you do from the data release, you can scroll through, and I've highlighted the columns where we've had a lot of measurable concentrations. You can see there's a fair number of pesticides where we just didn't see much, and that's evidenced by all these less than numbers and then the reporting limit. Diuron showed up fairly regularly in a lot of these samples. Again, another one I don't pronounce very well, but fluxiperoxide, I guess, was fairly widespread in samples. Imidacloprid was found kind of half of the time, sometimes at fairly large concentrations, sometimes not. I will note that its highest values were in the Burlington wastewater treatment plant outfall. And that seemed, which is this one. Although there was a high value in Potash Brook too. Here's a 60. And again, that's nanograms per liter. Metolachlor showed up fairly regularly. Not surprising, we see that nationwide along with the atrazines. Another one I'm not particularly familiar with, but showed up almost all of the time, as did a few others. Prometon, fairly common as well. You can scroll through this and have a look and really get a flavor for what's what the compounds look like. That's really the nuts and bolts of it. I don't think I want to say too much more than that. I guess one thing to note, neonicotinoids did show up on a much more regular basis than glyphosate and even AMPA. So that's something to note if you're interested in some quick highlights. But again, they were fairly low level, and this sort of highlights the ability to see things when you look at orders of magnitude lower reporting limits than you might otherwise get. I see a question. Someone raising their hand. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Paul. This is Lori Fisher. Sorry not to be on camera, but I don't have good bandwidth right now. I'm wondering, I have several questions. One, it sounds like you're going to be analyzing the data further, and so I'm wondering about time frame for that. And then, if I heard you correctly, you said it's not necessarily surprising that you didn't see glyphosate because it was a very dry year. And so I'm wondering if that has influenced, the dryness also has influence on the levels that you saw of atrazine, which was evidence, and any of the neonicotinoids, et cetera. How does that influence what you're seeing? And then finally, given how dry it was, are you recommending that you go back and assess conditions further at another time?
Yeah, great questions, and I like even better because I can answer them. The dryness definitely has an impact, and again, it's all fairly new to us looking at these data, so I don't want to misspeak or miscomment, but the hydrologic regime, as we call it, how much precipitation versus how many days without precipitation, definitely impacts the things that control pesticide concentrations, which is the half-life and how much they adsorb to stream particles. So here's an example. If a pesticide's applied and there's marginal amounts of precipitation, let's say the pesticide's doing its job as intended, but there's not enough precipitation to move it much beyond the soil layers to which it's applied, then the half-life effect would be it's going to stay in that zone longer. It's going to degrade further, and concentrations would be expected to be lower. Versus if you had direct runoff right after application, you might see higher concentrations at certain periods along the hydrograph, whether it was the rising limb of the runoff or the falling limb. But these things all have an impact, and we'll be taking a look at that to the degree we can as we move forward. Regarding your second question, yeah, it would be good to look at this under, certainly under different hydrologic regimes. And we're fortunate enough that we'll be able to, you know, for the sake of understanding it. We did not apply directly to the Lake Champlain Basin Program grant award for Lake Champlain monitoring, but we are collaborating with Stone Environmental on their proposal, which was awarded. So we'll have a second shot at sampling for some of these compounds, either in the same streams or perhaps different ones, but in the same area.
God, that was.
Great, thank you.
All right, Mr. Clifford.
Yes, in regard to the neonicotinoids, I'm just curious, was there a difference in the urban areas versus the ag areas? I haven't read the data, so I'm just asking.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And again, I don't want to misspeak. I haven't scrutinized the data quite in that way, but my recollection is that we did see neonicotinoids in both ag and urban settings. And I believe in some cases they were similar. I could be wrong, but in other cases they were not. So they are showing up definitely in both environments.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Mr. Elliott, looks like.
Yes, Joseph, was the higher concentrations of some of the compounds in the urban areas, does that give you enough information to tie those back to certain products that are being used either in the private or public sector?
Probably, yeah. So without, again, you know, I haven't looked at this data carefully enough to say, but there are certain things we know about the two basins. I mean, the urban basins were very small. Anglesby Brook and Potash Brook are tiny. So, you know, being able to think about, you know, what actual land uses are happening in those small drainages and what concentrations of compounds we see will most likely allow one to shed light on products. The other thing that will be, you know, useful is looking at which compounds occur with which others. So, you know, that probably will shed a little light on both products and uses.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? Sorry, I'm not more on top of these data, but they just really got to a place where we could start looking at them in the public light.
Yeah, hi, quickly. This is kind of off topic. This is Bob Fisher. You said you were USGS for a long time. I live in Barrytown. I was good friends with Greg Hilgendorf. So, and his wife. That's it.
Thanks. Yeah, he was a good colleague and a good friend to all of us. So thanks for remembering him. And I'm sure, just for the sake of others, Greg passed away too early. But there's a very nice memorial plaque to him on the Winooski, or maybe it's a Trib, in Montpelier, near the post office building, if you ever happen to get down there.
Yeah, it's the Trib coming right into it. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks. Bree, looks like your hand's up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, Joe, regarding the Stone Environmental Grant. Is it multi-year, and how much is that grant towards monitoring?
Well, so my understanding of it, and anyone else who knows better can feel free to chime in. It was a $300,000 grant award, and it was largely aimed at, again, this is my understanding, development of a framework for monitoring in Lake Champlain. or furthering the development of a framework. And so part of that is going to be thinking about what's known about chemical inputs, what we want to know about chemical inputs, and then devising a plan to do some initial sampling for some of those inputs.
Is that mostly herbicides, or is it a broader spectrum of?
I think it's pretty broad. Yeah, it's broad. I mean, they even discussed at one point, they were discussing microplastics as well, although I don't think that made the cut. It may have. Actually, it may have.
Okay, yeah. So it's not that focused on pesticides. All right.
No, not so much focused, but rather inclusive of.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And I might add, part of their interest in working with us, Cree, was to take advantage of our Sacramento Neonic laboratory and our Kansas glyphosate laboratory. So we'll be sending samples to the same place.
Great, good, thanks.
Cree, it's Mark, and as a follow-up to that, that RFP and study was a direct response from the Technical Advisory Committee from our request some 18 months ago that some baseline monitoring begin related to herbicides, pesticides, and what has been called next generation, even though they've been used for decades, these emerging contaminants. And so it's fairly comprehensive, but also targeted in response to our specific request to essentially do a broad literature review and some initial sampling and develop a sampling protocol that might be used in the future. So we're happy they jumped on it and developed the funding for it, and it was quickly approved by the executive committee and steering committee. So we're excited for that to get going.
Oh yeah, thanks for that background. I'm sure there are other basins in the country that have a framework.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Joe, thanks again. I know that it was really just a preview and that the data set, I didn't even realize it was released just last week. So we appreciate you being able to share what you could and give us some insights and the story of how things occurred through our dry summer. And we'll look forward to more in the future. So unless there's any other questions from anyone else, I think we could possibly move on to round Gobi. Although I also don't see any of our legislative members joining us to start a conversation about a legislative recap. So any other questions for Joe before we let him go? Okay. Joe, thanks again. We appreciate you making the time today, and we'll look forward as your report comes to publication.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. And I put the link to the data set in the chat if anybody wants to access that.
Thank you, Joe.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
So I did hear back from Meg. She gave me a call. She is stuck behind a big accident on Route 7, so I don't think she's going to be able to join us today. And I sent a follow-up email to our legislative members, but I don't know if they're going to be jumping on either. So we could end up with a quite abbreviated agenda, it turns out.
Yeah, I know Carol said that she was going to work hard to join. I didn't see anything from Senator Brock, and I haven't heard from Senator Bray in a while. I don't know that, Katie, have we heard anything more round Gobi wise that we could share in the in-betweens? I don't recall having any additional conversation or any additional updates. I will tell you that my daughter came through the canals and there was no outreach, education, or meaningful communication to anyone going through the canals about the round Gobi. And I was a little surprised and more than a little disappointed that the Canal Corporation, given all of the energy around we're going to double flush and we're going to do these timed protocols for moving through, that there wasn't some base communication. She said they had to really search for it, and she wouldn't have if she didn't have me hounding her that she couldn't become the Gobi Express coming up the river.
Mark, when did she go through?
She went through on the 24th or so, a couple days after it opened.
Okay.
She actually, I think the Melosira southbound passed them in the Hudson, so it was probably one of the first boats to go through.
Okay.
To its new home in Savannah.
And did they have the schedule though? Was it the time, and
They did. They did have to go through the schedule for the timed, and they were double dumping. I think it was lock 5 and 6, lower than I thought. Also, I thought they were going to double dump at Fort Edwards, where the canal truly begins and is not part of a river system. But they went through fairly quickly and easily. But Lucia said there was no meaningful communications regarding invasive species as they went through.
So they didn't even explain the
No.
scheduling or anything. That's really disappointing, but and maybe something that we should follow up on in terms of writing them a letter, just to reinforce our concern as a CAC and to try and hold their feet to the fire.
Right.
I'd be happy to collaborate with you on that if the other members think it's a good idea, but it just seems like that's an important part of the steps that they're taking is the public education.
Yeah, I agree completely. I know that the new Basin Program / New York DEC hire, specifically for that communication and outreach around the canal and the next phase of the canal study and follow up on the recommendations. Did everyone receive the email with the report, the phase 1 study final report? I'm not sure whether, I think everyone on this Vermont CAC was on the listserv. Ryan at the Basin Program shared the final report. Maybe Katie, you could just add that into essentially the recommendation is to build a barrier, fill in the lock, and put in a large boat travel lift with a decontamination station in between, and then on either side of the barrier for smaller boats have a trailer and a vehicle to haul them, decontaminate, and then put them back into the canal to continue on. That's the very simplified version of what was proposed. It's a long read. It's got some interesting history, and so I'd recommend taking a peek at it and going through it. There's some interesting history and some detail about what the hydrologic systems are that help the canal function. And then for me, very interesting was one of the appendices has a summary of species, indigenous species and invasive species, with images, it was just a nice primer for that I could share with other people on what to look for that I hadn't seen consolidated into a single document like that. So
Right.
it's worth taking a look. I don't know, do other members feel like a follow-up, just sort of reiterating expectations that we take this opportunity for enhanced education related to endangered species, and specifically around goby, is warranted? I'd be happy to draft something and share it. Any other thoughts from members?
That makes sense to me. I think it would be good to reinforce it.
Yeah, this Bob Fisher, I agree.
I guess I wonder what they've done and what they think they've done, and if what they've done matches, what they think they've done matches what they've done.
Yeah, my understanding was they were still thinking about what they were going to do and trying to figure out exactly what the plan was. I guess I assumed that some basic bullet points, communications would be shared. I don't recall seeing it, and I haven't looked since probably mid-May when Lucia was coming up the Hudson River or coming up through New Jersey, keeping her updated on what the scheduling was, because they hadn't come up with the scheduling until just maybe a week before. I don't recall seeing anything about it on the scheduling landing page. It was in DEC's page and connected to news releases, but nothing really direct. So that would seem to me to be a really great place to start, is when someone looks, I want to go through the lock.
Right, exactly.
Share the information.
No, I think it's a great idea.
All right, Lori, I'll work with you over the next couple days and see if we can just draft something, and then we'll share it with everyone for before we send it off.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mark, and everyone.
Well, I guess we can talk a little bit about July retreat. We're focusing on July 26th as a date, and as a place. We tried to host it at Echo or the Community Sailing Center, but they're both so booked with camps that their facilities are really only available in the evening. So it really doesn't accommodate us. We're working on Main Street Landing. We've also reached out to the Grand Isle Lake House, which is up in Grand Isle, to see whether we could meet there. It's a beautiful place on the lake. And of course, working on possibly back at the Gordon House at the Basin Program headquarters. So stay tuned for that. But July 26th from about 9 till 3 was the consensus date for nearly everybody. So mark that down, and we'll have follow-up on agenda and more specifics, hopefully towards the end of this week or early next week.
So Mark, when you note nearly everyone, does that mean our 4 legislators are going to be available then, as far as you and Katie know?
Katie, you're gonna have to, I didn't look at the most recent poll.
Yeah, they are unfortunately the only ones who have not responded to the poll.
I guess my concern is, I think it's really important to have them at our retreat. And I would say that we should go for a different date if we can't do that. I mean, that's just my opinion. But in terms of, I'm concerned about nobody being able to make it to tonight's meeting to do the postmortem. And we really need legislative input as part of creating that action plan, I feel, to make good use of our time.
I will personally call them to try to get them fixed on. We'll work for the 26th because it worked for most of the members, and see what we can do. And if we need to change it, we'll try to get that out, look at the doodle poll again, and see what the next best alternatives are.
Thank you. And Mark, this isn't to, put extra burden on you or Katie. It's just, I personally think that it's really key to have the legislators there for helping create that action plan. And I know you've done a lot of outreach already.
Well, we'll part of our jobs is to rally the troops, so to speak. So we'll do that follow up again. Yeah, I'm surprised. Carol and Carrie thought had replied. She's in my thread for tonight, and apologized for forgetting. So we'll follow up again. Wayne?
Yeah, Mark, I don't know. Burlington main plant, the wastewater plant, has a relatively nice conference room down there. I don't know what the availability of that is.
Yeah, I'll follow up with that too. We hosted a couple of meetings there.
Yeah, parking's a bit of a challenge there, but that's a great location.
Right.
It is. And we also have a room of equal size and that we have used for many meetings at my Airport Parkway facility, and you're certainly welcome to use that anytime. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm thinking we've, about 20 people or so, possibly a few more if we can get everyone in attendance and guests and speakers and things like that. So we will follow up and hopefully have consensus before the end of the week. And Hillary, thanks again. Josh, we're going to get him in and be part of that topic. And I just heard him on, I think it was public radio, possibly something else I was listening to. Anyways, on the radio the other day, talking about climate change. And
he was, and that interview was a little there wasn't a lot of data, or it wasn't very in depth. So, but yeah, he's great.
Okay, well, I think we can have a fairly truncated meeting this evening. Are there any topics anyone wants to bring up related to our meeting tonight, our retreat, and any other planning for next year? Okay, I'll end with a quick reminder that at our retreat, historically, we have elected chair and vice chair. And so anyone who has any interest, I've shared, I'm happy to continue serving as long as you are willing. Historically, we've worked to have the vice chair becoming prepared to take over chairperson. Denise said that she was happy to continue, but not really. She just shifted into a new position and doesn't think she's really ready to move into a chair position. But also noted that if someone was interested to take over as vice chair with the goal of taking over and having some succession, she was very open to it. So anyone who might be interested in stepping into either of these leadership roles and working with Katie, it's a lot less work because Katie does such amazing work and really facilitates coordinating with us and our colleagues really well. And as chair, attendance of the Basin Program meetings is a reasonable time commitment. but I found it terribly rewarding, terribly interesting, lots of amazing people and really great work going on. And so I don't want to hog that because it's too bad that it's not easier for others to log in and connect to those. There's some great conversations and some really great work with the federal and state and Quebec partners. So anyone who's interested, feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to talk about it more and talk about it in advance of the retreat. Wayne?
Yeah, Mark, just a procedural. Do you know if there's a residency requirement for appointment to this board?
I don't believe so.
There isn't, okay.
I don't believe so. We've tended to, and people have been in the basin on the Vermont side. But other than that, there hasn't been any, I'm not aware of any restrictions. Certainly it's not written anywhere.
Okay.
Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock. We can cut our meeting short by an hour, and there's still lots of daylight to get outside and go after the what are they calling now? The spongy moths, and beat back the mosquitoes, depending on where you live. But enjoy. We'll be in communication towards the end of the week with some follow-up on the meeting, and looking forward to seeing you all, hopefully in person. Otherwise, many of you in person and the rest on Zoom. So we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
I'll be in
Bye,
touch.
everyone.